What happens when two powerhouse voices clash over something much deeper than music? When a seemingly innocent question unleashes years of buried resentment, and when the cameras keep rolling as everything falls apart? You're about to witness one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below because this story will leave you speechless. The Kelly Clarkson show had always prided itself on warmth, on that rare feeling that guests were stepping into a living room rather than a studio, where conversation flowed as easily as coffee. Hosted by Kelly Clarkson, the program had become a refuge from ambush journalism, a place where celebrities let their guard down, because the host seemed to understand. Fame is both glitter and gravity. That reputation made what happened with Shania Twain all the more jarring. Shania arrived that morning immaculate and composed, signature blonde hair falling just so, her black blazer tailored to confidence. Crew members whispered that she seemed quieter than usual, but nerves were nothing new. Kelly greeted her guest with a broad smile and familiar spark, though the producer notes in her hand hinted at topics that could crack glass. The iconic couch waited beneath warm lights. Fans filled the first rows, phones tucked away in respect, eyes bright with expectation. At first, everything went exactly as planned. New projects, tour dates, laughs about life on the road. Shania spoke with practiced ease about songwriting as survival, about turning scars into choruses. Then Kelly leaned forward, the shift subtle but unmistakable, like a breeze before a storm. She praised Shania's resilience and asked, gently, she thought, about persistent rumors around collaborations that never happened, about stories of tension behind studio doors. The air changed. Shania's smile held, but her shoulders stiffened. Kelly clarified, attempting calm, saying fans deserve to hear it straight from the source. Shania answered carefully, then pushed back. Are we really doing anonymous sources on a couch built for honesty? A ripple of discomfort moved through the audience. Cameras closed in. Kelly pressed once more, citing people in the room. Shania's laugh was brittle now. Then bring them into the light. The producers froze in the wings. Kelly sensed a defining moment and leaned into it, convinced transparency could only help. Shania stood up so abruptly her mic wire snapped taut. The movement startled the crew. The set, once a sanctuary, felt suddenly too small. Clear the air about what? She demanded. Kelly tried to steady the moment, urged her to sit, insisted it wasn't an ambush. But the word had already escaped its cage and begun circling the studio like a hawk. Shania stayed standing, hands clenched as though holding an invisible railing. The lights painted shadows that sharpened her anger for every close-up. You call it transparency, she said. I call it repeating gossip as fact. Kelly stayed seated, palms open in what she hoped looked like reassurance, but sounded like insistence. She spoke of responsibility, of addressing concerns before they calcified into narrative. The word concerns hung there, weightless and vague, and Shania seized it. Concerns without names. Concerns without dates. Concerns without facts. The audience readjusted, as if the temperature had dropped. A fan whispered something that sounded like disbelief. Kelly's jaw tightened, and with it, the tone changed. She suggested that Shania's defensiveness implied truth. The suggestion landed like a slap. Kelly rose to her feet, matching the posture she now faced. The couch, once a symbol of safety, sat empty between them like a neutral witness. Shania's voice shook not with fear, but with the effort to stay measured. She spoke of decades built on labor, not rumor, of tours and writing rooms and trust stitched together across continents. Kelly countered with mentions of a charity album, of backup singers, of whisper networks that carried similar stories. Shania flinched for the first time, then straightened. Fabrications, she said, the word crisp. And I will not argue with shadows. Kelly, now clearly rattled, jabbed at the space between them with the edge of her voice. She accused image management, of a persona polished by publicists. That was the fracture point. Color flooded Shania's face. Authenticity is not a costume, she said, breath sharp. My life has been work and grief, and surviving both on stage and off it. Do not dress that as fiction for your plot. The room felt smaller with every sentence. Crew members exchanged looks that were part warning, part prayer. Shania demanded specificity. Kelly fired back with generalities. The loop tightened like a knot. When Kelly finally breathed the word narcissistic, it didn't echo. It exploded. The audience gasped the way people do when something drops in a quiet church. Shania went rigid, then moved with decision, fingers snapping at the mic pack. The yanks sounded loud in the hush, plastic against fabric, cable against skin. She laid it on the table like evidence in a trial she refused to attend. "This is how reputations die," she said softly now. "Not with proof, but with repetition." Kelly recoiled at the change in temperature, tried to soften, tried to say these conversations mattered. Shania's eyes, bright with hurt, did not blink. "Conversations require clarity," she said. "You offer fog." Somewhere offstage, a producer wiped a hand over a sweating forehead. Cameras rolled because cameras always roll, and the longer they did, the harder it would be to undo whatever injury was being written into this moment. Kelly attempted a reset, her voice gentler, her hands raised in surrender. The words sounded right, but the timing was wrong. "You called me a name that follows you for life," Shania replied. "You questioned the spine of my work. There is no rewind for that." She edged toward the exit, then stopped, as if remembering something essential and refusing to leave it behind. 30 years, she said, of being told when she was too much and when she was not enough. Of divorce like an avalanche. Of illness that taught her the grammar of pain. Of returning to stages that once chewed her up. She had been dismantled in private. She reminded them and rebuilt herself with songs. This, however, felt like demolition for sport. Kelly listened, arms dropping, anger draining into uncertainty. For the first time, the host looked like the guest. Kelly tried again, phrasing her questions as an invitation to set records straight. Shania laughed, not from humor, but from disbelief. "Set straight what you will not even draw," she said. "You sketch monsters and ask me to slay them." The audience shifted, torn between two women they admired, pained by the collision. A fan wiped her eyes. A camera operator's shoulders slumped, as though the weight of the lens had doubled. Kelly insisted the sources were credible. Shania challenged the invisibility of that credibility. "Names?" she asked. "Dates? Rooms? Songs? Bring me a single detail I can touch." None came. The silence was not empty. It was crowded with everything unsaid. Kelly's mouth opened and closed around. Answers that couldn't land because there was nothing solid to land on. With a sadness that felt older than the room, Shania spoke of unicorns and proof of how absurd. It was to disprove something that had never been properly accused. The words were gentle, but they cut clean. Kelly's face changed, the set of her shoulders sagging in a way that cameras did not try to flatter. She asked for a breath. Shania refused, not out of spite, but because breath implies air, and the air here had curdled. "This was never a platform," Shania said. "It was a play." Kelly flinched, then whispered that drama was not her aim. Shania shook her head. "Drama does not ask permission. It arrives when dignity is treated as optional." She turned again toward the exit, heels clicking a metronome for the end of something. Kelly called after her, the voice that usually soothed now bare and small. "Wait." Shania paused, just long enough for the room to hope. The pause stretched, elastic and cruel. It snapped. Shania did not turn back. She walked, the sound of her steps loud as punctuation. Behind her, Kelly stood in a studio that no longer felt like home. The couch waited uselessly. The table held a small black rectangle, silent now, a witness without a mouth. The audience sat frozen, unsure if applause or prayer would be more appropriate. A producer finally moved, hands shaking as she gestured for a cut that felt years late. The cameras obeyed, but the moment did not. It had already escaped into memory, into phones and whispers and whatever tomorrow would write with it. Alone, Kelly stared at the exit. Her reflection in a dark monitor looked older, not in years, but in consequence. She had wanted clarity and found chaos. She had believed the right question could save a story. Instead, it had bled one. An assistant offered water. Kelly took it without drinking. Her throat was full of words that would never air. Back in the hallway, Shania leaned against a cool wall and closed her eyes. The quiet was a relief and a weight. A publicist asked if she was all right. She nodded, then shook her head. Both were true. She had sung through storms. But this felt like a different weather system, one that formed indoors without warning. News would come, she knew, fast and blunt. Think pieces, hot takes, 1,000 small verdicts. She felt strangely light, as though something had been cut away, though she couldn't tell if it was wound or weight. She breathed, slow and deliberate, counting as she had taught herself to do once in a hospital room when machines spoke, louder than hope. Inside the studio, Kelly spoke to the room that was no longer there. Apologies rehearsed themselves in her mind, each one arriving too late. She wondered where the line was between courage and cruelty, and how easily she had convinced herself she stood on the right side of it. The show had been built on trust. Today it had tested how fragile that structure could be. By nightfall, clips would loop with captions that flattened history into headlines. By morning, both women would wake to a new architecture of opinion. But for a brief hour, between what was said and what would be written, there was only the truth as it felt, heavy in the chest, hot behind the eyes. Shania left the building without changing out of the blazer she'd worn like armor. Outside, the air tasted of rain. She lifted her face to it, letting a few drops mark her skin like notes she didn't need to sing. Somewhere inside, Kelly remained, counting the cost of a question and the price. Television had captured something real that day, even if not what it sought. Not a scandal, a reckoning, not with facts, but with the damage caused by their absence. And in that, the story finally told itself. Not on a couch, not under lights, but in the quiet after, where both women stood, separate and human, measuring what could be carried forward and what would have to be left behind.